Hi, I'm Scott Phillips, and I'm the founder of Rise Art. Today, I'm at our London gallery in Soho. One of the questions that we get from collectors all the time is questions around value, around price. Is this work worth the value and the money that I'm thinking about spending on it? And we wanted to discuss a little bit about the factors that go into pricing artwork. Today, I'm joined with Phin Jennings, curator at Rise Art. We're going to offer you 3 tips on how you can look at value and pricing when you're considering an art purchase, and give you some tools to take in so that you can also be confident when you bring up pricing with anyone who you're considering buying a piece from. I remember going once into a gallery and asking for a price list and being told actually just to leave an email and that I'd have to be vetted before understanding the works that were available and the pricing. And funnily enough, I think galleries really like it this way. It creates a bit of exclusivity and a bit of demand and allows them to validate collectors before selling and disclosing prices of the work. Now, as more and more artwork is being sold online, and also as a new generation starts collecting artwork in general, people are tending to be more transparent on pricing. Then let's start from the beginning. What factors does an artist who's just started out take into consideration when they're thinking about pricing their work for the first time?
Without a great record of past sales to base pricing on, it is difficult for an artist who's brand new to the market to start pricing their work. I think 2 key things to consider here are consistency and accessibility. Accessibility is important to make sure your work isn't priced too highly so people have a way in to begin collecting your work and it's not putting anyone off. This brings me on to consistency. You can always bring your prices up in a slow, considered way, but bringing them down sends a bad message to collectors who might be interested in your work but worry it won't retain any value. If you want to look for a way of beginning to price your work, or a way of looking for how much an artist should be pricing their work at, there are many arbitrary methods you can use, such as a price per square centimetre or a price per hour of the artist's work, and add materials prices onto that.
What factors would you consider important when an artist starts to get traction in the market?
Once an artist has begun to establish a bit of a market for themselves and sell works, there are a number of things that influence their pricing, and generally what you'll see is an artist's pricing, either controlled by themselves or their dealers, slowly growing up through this stage in their career. A few examples of what might influence such increases come in the form of CV highlights, like acquisitions, awards, or exhibitions. A good example of this is an artist I've been working with recently, Leora Chipru, whose work has gone up in price between 2019 and 2021 by about 50%. The reason behind this is that she was included in the shortlist for the Ruth Borchardt Self-Portrait Prize. She was a part of New Contemporaries in 2021, and she's also had works acquired by the Soho House collection. Another thing worth mentioning in terms of artist pricing on the primary market when they are beginning to sell work is the work itself, the nature of the work, and the body that it comes from. As an artist continues to work and their practice deepens, naturally some bodies will become worth more than others. For example, Andy Warhol, even while he was alive and selling on the primary market, his soup cans sold for much more money than, for example, his screen print cow, which you can still get to this day for about £1,000. But when an artist or their dealer wants to begin increasing their prices, consistency is key. It's much more of a long-term point of view for a dealer or an artist to increase the prices of their work slowly but surely and steadily, making sure that prices aren't liable to fall back down again.
You mentioned gallerists in the primary market. For new collectors out there, what's the difference between the primary and secondary market, and how do these differences impact pricing?
Yes, there's a big difference between the primary and secondary market, and more importantly here, what they mean for an artist's pricing. When an artist first sells their work, this may be through a dealer or an agent from their studio, that transaction happens on the primary market. Any transactions involving that artwork after that first one happen on the secondary market. These may be directly from collector to collector, through an auction house, or even through the artist's primary market dealer. The main difference between primary and secondary market sales of a work is that on the secondary market, the prices don't tend to be controlled by the artist or their dealer. This brings me to the first main difference in pricing between primary and secondary market transactions, which is that the secondary market is much more volatile. An artist dealer on the primary market has a vested interest in slowly but surely increasing an artist's pricing, whereas an auction house will literally sell the work to the highest bidder. This means that pricing is at the whims of the market and can be subject to hype or speculation or so many other things. And countless times we've seen an artist's value be what they call overcooked on the secondary market, whereby people bid work up for a certain period of time, and then before you know it, when the bubble bursts, the prices will come crashing down, leaving the artist worse off than they were when they were just selling on the primary market. The opposite can also happen. and the work can be undervalued on the secondary market. This generally happens because auction houses are dealing with thousands, if not tens of thousands, of different artists' work, whereas the dealer or the artist themselves have a deep contact book and knowledge of the artist's work. For example, I heard recently from a gallerist that he bought at auction on the secondary market one of his artist's work. It was a video piece, and I believe he bought it for about £3,000. He then went back to his contact book. He saw there was a waiting list of people wanting to buy the exact same work from him, the artist's main dealer, and he sold it for its actual value, or its primary market value, which was about 3 to 4 times the price he bought it for in the secondary market. The upshot of this for collectors looking to buy work on the secondary market is that you should take prices with a pinch of salt, and if you've done your research, you can definitely get a good deal. Prices on the secondary market aren't always overinflated, as we read of in the art columns, and although sometimes they are, you can certainly get a good deal on the secondary market.
When it comes to pricing, what recommendations or tips would you give for new collectors?
If you're a collector at the beginning of a journey of looking at buying an artist's work, there are 3 tips I have to help you glean what the right price is for a work and learn a little bit more. So the first is to research the artist themselves. Go on their website, look at their CV, see what collections they're in, which exhibitions they've been part of, what galleries they're associated with. All of these things are going to have a bearing on their pricing. For example, an artist who's shown internationally in multiple public and private collections and won awards is going to be worth a little bit more money at the beginning of their career than an artist who's relatively unknown, maybe only shown in their degree show and local exhibitions and isn't in any major collections. The second is to research the artwork itself. Even if the artist does have an impressive CV, many collectors and exhibitions under their belt, it may be that the work that they've been showing and the work that's been gaining traction is different to the work you're buying. For example, if you're looking to buy a drawing by someone who's normally more associated with painting, on the secondary market it's also worth looking at the condition, and you can always speak to the specialist at an auction house, ask for a condition report and make sure that everything's present and correct when you buy the artwork. My third tip is to speak to people. Speak to the artist, speak to the gallerist, speak to other collectors of their work and people who admire it. This way you can learn more about what their market has been like in the past, what it might be like in the future, what they're working on at the moment, whether they have any fun, exciting projects coming up. All of these good things are going to have an impact on the value of the artist's work, now and in the future. It's also important to learn about the work for your own collection. If your collection is to make sense, you're going to need to know about the work that you're buying and not be purchasing it just because you think you're getting a good deal or it's good value. If you learn about the work you're purchasing and genuinely love it, it will always be a good investment. Of course, when you do move it on, the more you know about the work and the more people you know who collect an artist's work or represent the artist's work, the more likely you will be able to sell it on for a fair price that works for you.
So in summary, while pricing can be a bit daunting in the art world for a new collector, if you've done those 3 things, if you've spoken to the gallerist or the artist about their work to get a sense of their practice and the passion involved in that, if you've looked over the artist and their CV and taken a deep dive into the consistency of their practice and how that's evolved, and don't be afraid to negotiate and ask for 5 to 10% off, especially in the primary market. If an artist or gallery thinks you're a strong supporter of their work, they're often really happy to accommodate this. I'd like to thank Phin for joining me once again and answering these questions about pricing in the art world. If you have any extra questions on this or would like to give us any feedback, simply email us. You can find our contact details on our website, which is riseart.com, or you can just DM us on Instagram and we'll get back to you. Thanks so much.